Good afternoon, everybody. Come on in, take a seat, get yourself comfy. If you're still putting the kettle on, we're about to start. Welcome to Information Rights, the first webinar of hopefully many. And we have the glorious and awesome and amazing Scott Sammons with us today, who's going to be talking us through something to do with Article 30. Basically, we're talking about the records of processing register. That's it. Oh, gosh, I can't talk today. So, guys, I'm not on camera today, and I apologize that you can't see me, but I'm not feeling my best. I had my COVID injection, but I'm here at least, and hopefully that's okay. Apologies to those who thought this was meant to be happening yesterday. I'm basically a comedy of errors right now. In fact, I've probably been a comedy of errors since 1988. Anyways, moving on. Hello, everyone. Please do comment to say that you're here. On the right-hand side, for those that are new, we have chat, questions, polls for people to be able to see, and you should be able to write in it. Woohoo! People are finding us. Hello, hello, hello. Just give people a few more minutes for anyone to dial in, and then we should get started. Ooh, sunny Swindon. Is Swindon ever sunny?
When was the last time I was there? That was over a year ago now, but what was the last time I was there?
My childhood best friend was lived in Swindon, and the only thing I really remember from it is the ridiculous roundabout. You basically close your eyes, put your foot down, and honk your horn, and hope for the best. How long do we expect this to last? Not that you're wishing it away. Scott, what have you roughly got lined up for us in terms of content?
Should be about, where are we now? Should be about half an hour or so. We should be done by about 1:45, because I know that we're on people's lunch breaks, so it should be done by about 1:45, 10:45.
Yeah, that's it. The magic roundabout. Yeah. My God, who on earth invented that? Jeez. So yeah, is that we will likely have questions. So you guys know where the chat function is. To the right of it, the questions tab. If you've got any questions for Scott, then please put them in there, because I'll be monitoring the questions rather than monitoring the chat. Feel free to comment throughout, and I will happily relay any of this to Scott. But if you do specifically have a question, then do put it in the questions box, as it ensures that you get a response. We won't delay this any further. I just want to say thank you very much for supporting Information Rights. It was launched as a new group on Data Protection Day, and it's something I'm very keen of, and is why I'm moving away from IRMS London. For those who have seen me at IRMS London before, you'll know that these events that I tend to put on tend to be quite deep dive related. There's less generalist talk, and it can be at various different levels. And Scott, what kind of level did you arrange this at today for our listeners?
Intermediate to advanced. I mean, if someone's never done a ROPA before, then they'll get stuff from it, but they'll need to go away and look at some things as well.
Yeah, so we'll be able to circulate the slides. This is being recorded, so if you kind of lose track, as it were, as you're going through or finding it too difficult, then Scott is always around. He's on Twitter, and avid tweeter is Privacy Minion, or you can contact me at rmgirluk, and we'll be more than happy to help. But if it is at a quite high level and you've got questions, you can also ask those too. So yes, let's not delay this anymore. Shut up, Emily. Let's get this show on the road. Over to you, Scott.
I was going to say, I've been waiting to say that for years. Welcome, everyone. My name's Scott Sammons, and welcome to the session on all things records of processing related. I've worked in the realm of information governance for a number of years now. I've spoken at a couple of IRMS events, and you probably would have seen me at IRMS related stuff when I was chair, which I've now stood down from, and I have spare time again.
There is something to be said here, just a small thing, is that Scott is here in his capacity as a business, and the fact that he is a practitioner in his own right, rather than with his IRMS hat on. So these things are coming from Lighthouse IG as advice, as opposed to IRMS. And I'm here as my IRMS capacity rather than RM girl.
I also won the New Professionals Award winner in 2012. So if you know someone that was eligible for award, do put in for this year. It is a great thing. So like Emily said, right now today I'm wearing my Lighthouse IG hat, my day job hat, where yes, I've worked in IG for a number of years, but now I even set up a business doing it because I love it so much. And hopefully over the course of the next hour or next half hour or so, when I talk to you about records of processing, that passion will come across, and hopefully you leave here with some of that passion as well. So some fair warnings. I gave these warnings last week when we talked about AI and the effects of AI on our profession. A little acknowledgement, I am not a robot. I'm also not a lawyer. So anything that's in here is very much guidance, advice, but would not constitute legal advice. Therefore, if you are looking to implement a records management program, a records of processing activities program, or you've got specific issues with GDPR or Article 30, then make sure you do get specific advice. And fundamentally, as we talked about last week at the AI session, if our new robot overlords are indeed watching, analysing, cataloguing everything that's said here, hi, you're right. So, a fair warning. While this is going to look at Article 30 and how it can benefit managing people's rights and obligations under the GDPR and other things, there will be some soapbox moments in here. Because records of processing, Article 30 gets a bit of a bashing. Even amongst seasoned data protection professionals, it still gets a bit of a bashing, and I don't agree with that. I think records of processing, Article 30, finding out what you've got and why you've got it is really important. So there will be some soapbox moments here. Some moments where you go, okay, Scott, your peaches are converted here. Move along, move along, move along. And I kind of apologise for those, and I kind of don't. We need to sing more about the benefits of Article 30. So I'm going to do it more. So one of the things to let you know of as well is that as a practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming, I present these ideas to you, accepting that everyone's map of the world is different. Everyone is coming at this from different angles. And when I'm dealing with clients, both when I was in-house and now as a consultant, I accept that everyone is doing the best they can with the resources that they have available. Sometimes our information asset registers, our records management programs, our ROPA is only as good as what we can do. Therefore, sometimes accepting that and wrapping a program of work around that is sometimes the best way forward, rather than looking at it and going, oh my God, this organization's done this. Why haven't we done that? I'm going to give you some tips, advice, guidance for how you can make it work for you. Also accept when you're working with clients, when you're working with your staff members, there's no such thing as unresourceful people. People have what they need, or they work with what they've got. They're only unresourceful states. So if people aren't doing what you need them to do, if people are resisting against a program, whatever it might be, then what are the blockers? Often we see the people as the blockers, but sometimes it isn't. It's something else. What is blocking them? And always remember that people cannot not communicate. So when you're looking at how they're handling data, what they're doing about personal data, records, information assets, whatever, they will be telling you things. Some of it might be nonsense, but some of it will be of use to you. So I strongly encourage you to listen to what they're saying. So what am I going to take you through? I'm going to take you through what is the records of processing. So in terms of what GDPR says, what the Data Protection Act 2018 says, what is it in terms of law? What does it actually meant to do? How does this interact with other things? For those of you that attended the Power of 3 webinar we did last year, It's very building on some of the principles that we looked in there to see what's what. We'll also look at best practice. I also want to know what you're doing. How have you done it? What worked well for you? What didn't work well for you? There might be some things in here that you go, yes, we do that. That works really well. Or, ooh, not tried that. Or that'll never work for us for one reason or another. And it's all perfectly valid. Because again, everyone does it differently. Now, you're probably asking, okay, Information Rights Group, why have you started with ROPA? Of all the different things that you could launch an Information Rights Group with, copyright, freedom of information, EIR, access to medical records, data protection, blah, 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 blah. Why have you gone with ROPA? Why have you picked Article 30, records of processing activities, as the starting point for an information rights group? And that's because Article 30 gets a lot of bashing. It really does. Even the other week, I saw a seasoned data protection professional that I've come to respect bashing it. And I disagree with them. I really do. Article 30 should be at the core of your data protection compliance program. Understanding what you've got, why you've got it, where is it, what is it being used for. Basically, what we're all about, information and records management, should be at the heart of your data protection compliance program. And anyone that says differently is wrong. There you go. There's a soapbox moment right there. Information and records management should be at the core of your data protection program, period. And because Article 30 is asking you exactly that, what have you got? Why have you got it? What is it being used for? Where is it going? What controls have you got around it? Why would you not put Article 30 at the core of your data protection compliance program? Why would you not? But fundamentally, there is hope for battling some of this nonsense that some elements of the information community have around Article 30, and that hope is us. We, information and records management professionals, we know the value of doing this. We know the value of making sure we know what we've got, why we've got it, what it's meant to be used for, and all those other things that we do as information professionals. Therefore, we can put Article 30 right where it belongs, at the core of a data protection program. So that's why it's first, especially as we're the Information and Records Management Society. So you kind of expect us to put that front and center. So lo and behold, here we are. So what is this thing called records of processing? Now, I do acknowledge that calling it records of processing activities starts by giving people the impression that it's incredibly dull. If you were to rock up to someone and go, hello, I would like to sit here and go through your records of processing, please, they are instantly going to switch off. It does sound incredibly bureaucratic. It is a really unfortunate name for something that is actually incredibly useful. So in the GDPR, excuse me, both the EU one and the UK one, Article 30 requires us to keep records of what we're doing. Way back when, under the old Data Protection Act 1998, this is what we sent to the ICO. So we would record to the ICO what we were doing, and it gave a high-level list of what we were doing, and that would then be publicly accessible. And let's be honest, that list was rubbish. Didn't really tell you anything. Very high level. And I think even in 2014, when they upgraded the system that they were using, it got several things wrong. It assumed what you were doing, and what you were doing was wrong. So it's kind of widely accepted that it was a bit rubbish and a bit pointless. Didn't really inform data subjects of anything. It was a bit pointless. So instead in the GDPR, it said, right, you keep these records yourself. You keep a record of what you're doing, why you're doing it, what you're using personal data for, where it's going, etc., etc. That then became Article 30. Now, you could do the very basic minimum. So you could do an exact replica of what was in the old program that was registered with the ICO under the old 1998 Act. That would be a way to go. But you're missing an opportunity there, massively so. So what does Article 30 require us to record? So front and center, it requires us to record what you're using personal data for. What are your purposes? What do you need personal data for? So front and center, why? Why are you using it? That drives everything. It drives your grounds of processing. It drives what rights someone has and what they don't. It drives what someone should be told at certain points. It might even drive what third parties you share data with and who doesn't. Your purpose, your reason for being is kind of front and center. So in terms of the list of what's in ROPA, it's also front and center. There's also a requirement to keep a list of what legal entities are doing that. So when we're talking about purposes for who? Purposes for just your legal entity, other legal entities, what legal entities are within scope of this processing here? And do you control those entities or does someone else? Are they just processors? In which case we'll list them as third parties. Are they actually controlled by you? So in some school environments, because I know there's a couple of schools in the audience, you might have a wholly owned entity or different entities within your trust, all those sorts of things. What entities, what legal entities, what controllers and potentially processors that you might own as well are within your domain, within your realm of control? Who do you process personal data on? Is it just staff and some customers? So for example, I've got some clients that do a lot of international shipping and they deal with very little of personal data of random members of the public and customers other than contact details, and that's it. The majority of their data is personal or staff employee data. So for them, their data protection world and their data protection challenges revolve heavily around employment with some bits and pieces for customers. Whereas on the flip side, schools, councils, universities, NHS, blah, 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 it's a mixture of the two. So working out who your data subjects are gives you a steer as to, okay, well, is this a big problem, a little problem? Are there certain types of data subjects where there'll be more challenges? So for example, if you're doing a lot of work with those with English as a second language, or data subjects that have learning difficulties, those sorts of things, then you know that you need to change your data protection program to accommodate that. So for example, giving someone a privacy notice that's a lovely complex thing will never work for someone that's in English as a second language or someone with learning difficulties. So an off-the-shelf GDPR compliant privacy notice will achieve for you naught. And how do you find that out? Your records of processing. What are you doing? Who are your data subjects? What types of data have you got? Is it just personal data? Is there some sensitive stuff in there as well? Why should that be there? How long are you going to keep it for? Part of your retention schedule. That's also something that your ROPA can help pull out. What are you doing and why? Where is it going in the world, if anywhere at all? Who does it get shared with or disclosed to in terms of actual third-party recipients, but also processors that are doing work on your behalf and delivering services on your behalf? And what technical and organizational measures have you put in place to protect that data? Some of these things might even exist in other places as well. So the reason for being for certain bits of information might also be in your information asset register. It might also, disclosures for third parties might sit in your CRM. Your controllers will definitely sit in ROPA. Data subjects might be in your asset register. Transfers might be in your asset register. Data types, retention might be in your retention schedule, technical measures, organizational measures, all those sorts of things. If you want a full overview of the discussion that we had last time, for those of you that didn't attend the Power of 3 webinar I did for the public sector group, it's on the IRMS YouTube channel. So you can see the hour-long conversation we had around merging these systems together and encouraging these systems to talk to each other, because they can indeed talk to each other if you want them to. Now, if you've seen the ICO template that was released, it is a gloriously, brilliantly huge Excel template. Now, we all work with Excel templates. We know their benefits. We know their limitations. So while it is a good template, it does give you a lot of insight as to what the ICO is looking for in terms of your records of processing. In terms of it being a functional document, it has its limitations. So you might want to pick the bones out of it and make something work for you. You also would have noticed that it goes a lot further than what's in Article 30, by a long way. Some of it is just adding in some definition, some of it is making some logical connections that we all have an interest in connecting as well. So for example, in the ICO template, it talks about pulling out naming the business area that relates to. So where this particular type of processing, which area in your organization is doing it, who's responsible for it, what privacy notices cover that processing. Are they live? Do you have copies of them? How do you know that they've been issued? What sort of data sharing agreements or data processing agreements cover that processing? What's the lawful basis? Have you married that up against the purpose? Where are the records of consent? Where do you keep those? Are they needed for that particular type of processing? Has this particular data been given out or released as part of a subject access request? Has the person been informed as part of your response to an subject access request that this is what their data is used for and this is what it isn't? Have there been any sort of DPIAs done on that processing? So what did that find out to see what's what and what's not? What sort of breaches have happened with that data? What risks are around that particular data? And where under the DPA 2018 you're required to have a policy document to legitimize using certain types of special category data, especially for the purposes of employment and substantial public interest, then where is that? And where is that made available as well? And again, very similar to the previous point, some of it will be in your asset registers, websites, contract databases, disclosure databases, your DPIA database if you have one of those, your security database if you have one of those, your ISMS and your websites. So it can be spread out all over the place. So if the ICO cometh, or even just for your own purposes, trying to work out where this stuff is, it can be a task. Helen in the comments even says that the ICO template is cumbersome, especially when trying to extract facts from large numbers of people who have no clue what they're looking at. You're absolutely right. It isn't very user-friendly. It's very much been designed for us, not for the end user. So I strongly encourage you to pick the bones out of it and come up with something that works much better. And I'm going to give you some pointers on that as we go through the next period. Now, challenge to you and the challenge that I put to anyone that says that Article 30 is a pointless waste of time and adds no value to your data protection program is find me an area of data protection that ROPA doesn't help with in any way, shape or form, even marginally. In terms of principle one, you can't be fair, honest and transparent with someone if you've got no idea what you're doing and why you're doing it. So your records of processing activity work, both to populate it in the first instance and to keep it up to date, means that you can legitimately be more transparent with someone. Otherwise, you're constantly going to be chasing your tail. So that's one area that it definitely helps with. Purpose imitation. Well, if I know that I've disclosed to people or I've told people these are all the different reasons why we use personal data within the organization and someone then wants to use it for something else, I've got a nice up-to-date list of what it's being used for. Is it legitimate that this new purpose fits in with this list? It gives me some context to be able to make a more informed decision. So there is some value there. Fundamentally, principle 3, keeping it to a minimum. Well, if I do my records of processing work, as we've all seen as part of this push to work out what we've got and what we haven't, we've already found some areas where we're collecting too much, or we're collecting duplicates, or there's bits of data that we can now get rid of because we don't need anymore. We can legitimately challenge and say, do you really need that? Do we need that for this? What does that relate to with that? That conversation that gets people going around what they're doing and why, we can start challenging are you being creepy? You probably are. Same sort of thing with accuracy. Where are we getting it from? So we've got a list of uses, but where is it coming from? If I'm reliant on other departments to generate this data for me to do whatever it is I need to do with it, or this third party to generate this data for me to do whatever I need to do with it. But I'm heavily reliant on them making sure that what they give me is accurate. And if it is then inaccurate, how does that work? What issues does that present? What can I do about it, if anything at all? Do I just need to accept that it will always be inaccurate? Same sort of thing with Principle 5, as in the comments in the chat I've already talked about, retention, setting retention, marrying up the retention schedule to the reasons why people have stated that they are using it for. Same thing with security, same thing with accountability. It affects and adds value and can inform your decisions across the board. So again, anyone that says that you can't, or RAPER adds no value, I challenge that. I really do. Let's take a simple example. They have indeed, Deborah, thrown too much into it, far too much. Pick the bones out of it, make it work for you. As long as it's got the basic Article 30 requirements in, make it work for you. One of the things we're going to talk about in a moment is asking yourself, what does good look like for your organization, for what you do and how you do it, your technological capabilities, all that jazz. What does good look like for you? Not what the ICO thinks looks good, what looks good, because that's ideal world, lovely jubbly whoop-de-doo. What we're looking for is, what does good look like for you, taking into account the bare minimum? So let's take something simple, like payroll, pay slips. They can appear in several lists. Emily's already said in the comments, for example, that she likes, or she prefers, or she advocates keeping things separately from your ROPA, your IAR, your retention schedule, things like that. And that makes sense, and that has value. Sometimes I advocate them talking to each other. So I do advocate keeping separate ones, especially as IAR is wider than just personal data. It's absolutely everything. So is your retention schedule. But I do advocate them talking to each other. So they could appear then in different places. There could be a record of what you do for payroll related data, pay slips in your ROPA. There'll be something in your IAR. Might be more than one thing in your IAR. And there might be something in your schedule. There might also be records of what you do with your pay slips in terms of disclosures, incidents, contracts, risks, DPIAs on the system that you design to manage payroll, all those sorts of things. So it appears in different places. The question to ask yourself is, how can we join these things together? How can we, as a document that uses personal data or has personal data within it, how can we link these things together so that when the ICO cometh or any other thing that arrives, we've got a good idea of what's going on with that payslip and can indeed help to manage it in a more constructive and better way. One example of how I've seen people categorize their records of processing entries is that they might start at a high level. So they might say, okay, what sort of data can we collect? What sort of personal data can we collect in? So we know we collect in employee data. We know that we collect in patient data. We know that we collect in, I don't know, social care user data. So one option is to say, okay, that data, what happens with it? We know we collect that in. What happens with it? Well, one sub-purpose or one primary purpose of that is delivery of payroll. So we know that we use employee data for payroll purposes, okay? Within payroll then, what do we then generate? What personal data is then used as part of that? Or we might use payroll for this, for this, for this, for this, but also for the production of pay slips, okay? What do we then do with that? Loads of different ways of doing it. There are loads of models out there, loads. Don't have time in the hour to go through all of them. But my advice to you and my instruction to you is to work out, for that one example, something relatively simple like a payslip, provision of payroll, how can we easily keep a record of what we do with that data, what issues exist around that data, what controls are in place around that data, and where it sits. So whether you do choose to merge all these things together, whether you do choose to keep them in separate systems, how do we make sure that they interact? Not only for our own benefit, but also for the business's benefit as well. As I say, there are several ways of doing it, and if you want to know more information on different ways of doing it, and even some of the ways that some of the people on the Power of Three webinar said, then I recommend watching the Power of Three webinar that's on the IRMS YouTube, because there were quite a few different models that were thrown into the mix there. So how do we do this then? Even if we just did a basic records of processing, how can we actually get this up and running and get people to see it as more than just an audit, more than just a document? How do we make ROPA sexy? There's the challenge. I know that isn't a picture of me. Fundamentally, it starts and ends with you.
I've been trying to make records management sexy for over 10 years. Apparently, I've still got a long way to go.
We all do. It's a challenge. And I know people that have just gone, nah, too much of a problem, not dealing with that. They go into it with the same level of defeat or sense of defeat as the staff members do. But fundamentally, if we're going to get staff to buy into this, if we're going to ask staff to tell us what they're doing and how they're doing it, and if we're going to make ROPA work and be more than just this reputation that it has for being a bureaucratic thing, then it starts and begins, or starts and indeed ends, with us. We are our biggest champions. Also remember, this is something that my old executive director said when I was at Essex County Council, and I totally agree with that. And she threw this around. She knew full well that we were cash stripping and we were, we faced challenges about this, and this. And she was a very busy woman. She knew exactly the issues around resourcing, buy-in, and etc., etc. But she did also acknowledge that just because something is complicated doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. So getting people to buy into what we're saying around records management, ROPA, getting the business to do it will be a challenge. There is no two ways about it. If you ask any single parent, first thing on a Monday morning, trying to get their kids to put on their shoes, it is a challenge. But nonetheless, we still do it because kids need to go to school and they've got to take their trainers with them. So we still do it. And it's exactly the same for this. We do these complex things. So while implementing a ROPA isn't like putting a man on the moon, the principle is the same. Getting people to do it, getting people to carry on doing it. So how can we make this more appealing? How, to Deborah's point, as she's put in the chat as well, how do we keep it up to date? Once we've got that initial buy-in, how do we keep that momentum going? And there are loads of different ways of doing it. So what I'm going to give you is almost everything. All the different ways that people have said that they do it, the ways that I've seen work, the ways that I've seen not work in different organizations, but work in others, all of it. So you pick the bones out of what works for you based on your priorities, your resources, your culture, where you are right now, an honest review of yourself. So I'm going to give you all of it. And all of them work, either on their own or as combinations of different things. Pick the bones out of it and make it work for you. But the key things that keep these things alive, that everyone accepts in terms of maintaining a program, maintaining culture change, and all those sorts of things, are language. The language we use to sell this is really important. The personalities that drive it, both at the top level, so as Mrs. Golding says there, right at the top level from senior leadership, right the way down to us. The language we use, the wording we use, the examples we use, all of it has value. From up there to down here, it all has value. So how do we make sure that that language is appropriate? What are we doing? Constant reminders. Change is consistent, sustainable activities, not just one and done. It's constantly out there, front and center. This is this, that is that. I'm a resource to you, business people. Therefore, use me. My knowledge is here to be used. I'm here to help. But constantly being there and being not that annoying person, but you know what I mean. That, hello, how can I help you? Hello, how can I help you? Which when we're really busy can be the most counterintuitive thing to do. But it does pay off maintaining that presence, that when they know you're there, they know that they're not alone. I'm also a big fan of bribery and corruption. And again, this depends on again, your culture, your ability, your budget, but paying people with sweets, getting people to buy into what you're saying, to listen to what you're saying. Get over that first initial hurdle with a cup of tea and a biscuit. Pizzas, kittens, puppies, whatever. Anything that gets you past that initial barrier, gets you over the hurdle and gets someone's bum on a seat listening to you, do it. Think outside the box. I'm a firm believer when I did my neuro-linguistic program course and master practitioner to become a licensed therapist, and this is something I want to build on and build a career out of as well, is that fundamentally we human beings work by seeing the world around us by what we've seen ourselves. We know what we know. Therefore, if we go into this program believing that this is a lot of work, that this is dull, boring, not a priority, then is it any really surprise that the business has exactly the same opinion? I've seen it time and again. People will go into the conversation with this is a lot of work, this is this is that, this is the other. And what they get back is what they put in or what they project. Whereas if we can go in with more of a positive, this is this, this is this, this is this, even when we're faced with insurmountable no's, even when we get those barriers, we get those no's, whatever else, we carry on regardless, then we're more likely to get there eventually. One of the other things that was fed back, and I've seen this time and again, is when we do our information audits to work out what we've got and what we haven't, to scope, to work with a business area. Again, the best ideal place is for you to work with that business area to work out what's what. But there are some things that you can do if you just can't do that. One of those is not calling it an audit. People hate audits. The moment you say audit to someone, they get a perception in their mind. They immediately put you in the role of the information police and think that you're out to show them up. Even though that is far from the truth. Unless they've got a different perception, most people's understanding of audit is of the negative, not of the positive. So call it something else. Most people tend to focus on what they're doing with someone. So it's a conversation around, what do you do? If you were to rock up to someone and say, give them a list. So for example, you give them a spreadsheet that says, what is your grounds for processing? How does this work? How does that work? Every single time you will get people going, I've got no idea what you're talking about. I don't know data protection, but I do know what I know. And what I know is what I do. So a lot of the most successful surveys, one-to-ones, whatever it is you're going to be doing, the most successful ones focus on what are you doing? So in order to do this, in order to onboard a client, in order to do this, that, and all the rest of it, in order to deal with a customer service complaint, what happens? What do you do? Take me through the process. Tell me what you do. I want to know about you. They're quite happy to tell you that because that's what they know. They know what systems they use. They know what the process is for doing this, 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 and this. They can tell you that and take you through it and reel it off reams and reams. Whereas if you ask them, what's your grounds for processing? Not a clue. Not a clue. And trying to get them to train them up on that, never going to happen. They're never going to understand it because they're not data protection people. Whereas they do know what they do. They do know their job because they're living it, breathing it. They do it every day. They know what to do with a customer service complaint. They know what to do to onboard someone. So revolve your questions around that. What are you doing? Okay, to do this, when you give this person a thingy number, a reference number, what systems do you use for that? What do you do for that? How does this work? Does another team get involved in this? Where did you get that from? Those sorts of things. Revolve your questions around what they're doing. You then get a good list of what they're reliant on. What are the key parts of that process that are then reliant on things like information assets, a key system, process, other staff member, whatever it might be. You also get a good understanding of what they're actually doing, which is also very useful for us. And you also get them to see, as you're going along, for them to spot the things that they do rely on. Oh, so it sounds like you really do need this particular system. What happens could you do this if that system was down? No, Could you do this if this was wrong? No. It gets them to see in their own terms, via their own map of the world, what it is we're trying to say, what it is we're trying to find out from them, because they all know that they do need to do these things. They do know that if the system is down or whatever it might be is down, then they're not going to be able to do their job. But when you put it in a formal structured thing, it becomes Klingon. Whereas if actually it's a conversation around what you do and how you do it, they get it, they understand it, they can relate to it a lot more. Therefore, when it comes to filling it in and filling in an information asset register or whatever it might be, A, you've partly sold them on the benefit of doing it because they now understand why we want to help them keep that system running, keep that spreadsheet up to date, whatever it might be. But you also then can show them, look, when this doesn't work either. So it gets you over one of those largest hurdles. The little things, they do count. They really do. Every single person that I know, whether they've run a successful program and they are in a big organization with lots of budget, or in a small organization with no budget, or a big organization with no budget, whatever, all the combinations in between, all the successful ones have focused on the positives. They've listened to the negatives and grown with the negatives, but they've actively promoted. They've taken small steps, small wins, recorded those wins. The fact that you've turned someone in the business from an enemy to an ally, brilliant. Record that. Keep that in mind. That's an ally that you can use again. Even if you're changing hearts and minds one by one, it is nonetheless still a positive, still getting closer to what it is you want to achieve. It also
you have a question. Okay.
Far away.
It says, how granular does the ROPA need to be? We've made a good start with our ROPA, but it's like the fourth bridge. As soon as we think we've reached a good point, it's like we're having to start from scratch because just asking too much of people in such a large organization.
It needs to be an accurate reflection of what you're doing. And again, it comes down to this point of what do you want it to be. So if it covers off the main bulk of what you do and how you do it, then one could make the argument that that is compliant. If, to your point, actually there's still stuff going on within the organization that we just don't know about, then yes, it will be like painting the fourth bridge. But that's a good thing because it then means that you're finding stuff out, more stuff becomes aware of, and there are less skeletons in the closet. So while it might feel like, oh, and don't get me wrong, we've all been there, we've all done that, but actually keep at it. It is a moving feast. It is a living document. It will grow. It will evolve. It'll move on. The new stuff will appear, and that is perfectly legitimate. This is a living thing because your organization is a living thing. So this has to live with it.
Has that answered your question? Mention in the chat if you got anything further. Thank you. I think it's our approach rather than the form. Perhaps, like you said, we keep the form and draw out the information in another way.
Could be training, could be advice, could be, you know, little videos for them to watch, little bits and pieces, taking an example and letting them replicate for that themselves, all those sorts of things. I'm a firm believer of whatever works. So try all of it, try everything. And then what works, build on that. Rather than if you constantly do it one way and you're finding that it's not getting you what you want, then change it and do something else instead. Build on what's what and what's not. I'm a firm believer of alliances and favours, so build them up. Get in your favours with IT, other areas, champions, whatever it might be. Alliances and favours make the world go round. Don't be afraid to ask. Can you help us with this? What is this? What is that? Can we try this? Can we try that? I know a couple of, there's one organisation that I did some work with a little while ago where they'd firmly, because they'd had so many no's over the years, they didn't bother asking the executive for anything anymore. Yeah, it's like, well, if you asked for this particular thing in just this particular way, or even rather than asking the executive, just focus in on one instead. Do it in a different way. Focus in on one member of the executive, get in some favours from them, build up a relationship with them, then move on to the next one. Be strategic about it. Sometimes just rocking up at the executive with our flag doesn't work. You're absolutely right, it doesn't. but sometimes it does. So if it doesn't work, try small steps. Try influencing and changing the opinion of one director, getting one of their service areas to do X and Y and Z, and then reaping the benefits of it. That might work. Work out what good looks like for you. What do you want your ROPA to do? Do you want it to be high level, so it captures pretty much everything you're doing, but at a high level? Do you want it to then go down into granular? Do you not? Do you want it to talk to other systems? Do you not? Do you want it to be a system? Do you not? Do you want it to be an Excel spreadsheet? Do you not? The world, in terms of how you want your ROPA to work, is your proverbial oyster. So what do you want it to do? Work that out. Work out what you want it to do for your organization, and then look around for solutions. There are some solutions out there. There are some best practices out there. Some of them will be in this room. Some of them will be on previous events. Ask people in the forums and things like that. What are you doing? Get in as much information as you can about what everyone else is doing, and then build that into your own cake. What do you want it to cake, and see what's what?
Scott, one of the things that, I don't know how you feel about this, I'd be interested to know your view, is that I've said in the past is that starting with an Excel sheet is perfectly okay, because at least you get to learn what it is you want, the columns you want to add, and all these kind of things long before you commit to a system that you may end up, if you don't add everything you need, having to pay thousands of pounds to add an extra column in. Whereas if you can prove the requirements for a ROPA system, is that you're able to come with much more of a business case for managing the stuff if you can prove it's being put in use. What do you think?
I totally agree. I'm a firm believer of letting the horse drive the cart, not the cart drive the horse. If you just go, oh, this organization is using X system or Y system, whatever, that's lovely for them, not for you. You're different. Your culture is different. Your technology is different. They might be the same school, college, council, that sort of thing. So they might be in a similar sector, but every organization is wildly different. So gather in what you want to do, gather in what other people are doing, and then come up with your own strategy, that Emily was saying, that works for you, that is tailored to your culture, your technology, your resources and capabilities. So it's something that you can legitimately achieve, even if it's step by step, chunk by chunk, little by little, getting to that what good looks like. Can you turn negatives to your advantage? What issues are you encountering? When you did it the first time round, what happened? What did staff tell you? What did they like, not like? What was missing? What risks have you got? What are the execs' sensitivities? What are they keen on? What are they not so keen on? There's loads of information out there to help you form a strategy that are useful and informative. Talk to people. Ask other people where they've implemented a big change program across their organization. How did they get on? What did they learn? What issues did they brush up against? What issues are IT brushing up against? Do they have a big problem, for example, with people understanding what is their desktop? In which case, when we come along and say, what is an information asset? If they don't even know what a desktop is, then there's no way they're going to know what an information asset is. So I'd strongly encourage, as your homework, is to work out for you, in terms of your ROPA, your information asset register, your retention schedule, this applies to all of them regardless, is what does good look like for you and your organization? What do you want it to be? What does good look like? What works within your organization? What doesn't? What has worked well within other organizations and what hasn't? What would stop you? Is it budgets? Is it constraints? Is it technical understanding in the organization? What is it? What are your barriers? Can you solve some of those barriers yourself? Do you need help from others? Do you need knowledge from other professionals? Do you need advice and guidance? Do you need an external person to say, do this, and the business will do it? I've been there. I've been internal, banging my drum left, right, and centre. And then the moment I get a third party in, or even another council in to come and say this, oh, yes, we should do that. Yes, we should. I've been saying that. It has its value. So work out what your barriers are, what your blockers are, and therefore what can you do to get around them and overcome them? Can you do that on your own? Do you need help, alliances, internal or external? what is it? Work out how ROPA can help you, how it can be of value, because I'm a firm believer that it can be, but it's heavily dependent on us. The internal data protection officer, records manager, whatever, to make it work, to drive it forward, to define what good looks like, what we want it to be, to come up with a plan for getting there, working out what blockers are in place and what aren't, and who are your allies, who are your champions. Have a look at what templates are out there. In the chat box, there was a link to the ICO template. Pick the bones out of it. There is some good stuff in there. There is some terrible stuff in there. But again, it depends on your organization, your approach. You might take one look at it and go, actually, this would really help us. Because I'm a relatively simple organization. Yes, this would be perfectly fine for us. Or you could take one look at it and go, oh, no, not a spreadsheet. My God. Either way, pick the bones out of it. Everyone's doing ROPA in one form or another now, so there's lots of examples out there to ask. If you don't ask, you certainly don't get, in my firm opinion. That's me on a soapbox, pushing the benefits of records of processing and ROPA. As I say, the recording will be made available. I'm also going to make a little PDF available of the content as well. And there's the Power of 3 presentation as well that's on the IRMS YouTube if you want more inspiration. But do ask. Ask other professionals, ask other organizations, network, get in as much information as you can about what people are doing, what works well and what doesn't. Pick the bones out of it and create something that works for you. Because fundamentally, if we don't do it, no one else will. So we've got to be the champions for it. We've got to be the positive, shining light for it.
Okay, well, from IRMS to you, Scott, I just want to say thank you very much for giving up your time. We do appreciate that, you know, time is money. So thank you very much. We've got a couple of comments in there going, continue to be unique, Scott, which the unique breed that you were called earlier as a DP person, I think is very fitting as a good thing as opposed to a bad. Just a couple of things from me, guys, before you disappear, is that could you just make sure that you've answered the polls at the top? It's helping shape where the Information Rights Group is going as to what topics you'd like to see, and if we've got members here or not members. As one thing to point out is that whilst these webinars right now are available as free for non-members, they won't always be, and I'm not sure what warning you will get as to when they stop being free for non-members. So by all means, please do look at joining the society if you're not a member already. And yeah, the comments are pouring in, Scott. Great presentation, very useful, thought-provoking as ever. Thank you, and very helpful. So from us to you, thanks very much, Scott. And to everyone else, I will see you in March with another one. I'm looking at providing, whilst we continue to be in the COVID situation, providing an information rights webinar every month. So do keep an eye out on the IRMS website and also in the forum. I did mention in the chat, actually, Scott, if you wouldn't mind posting the homework that you suggested in the forum and maybe stirring a bit of discussion offline, well, I say online, offline, off this webinar, as I'd love to know what some people's responses are. So you can find us in the forum all throughout. And if you need assistance, ask any one of the exec or the group chairs to give you a show as to where the forum is in the Information Rights Group. There's bunches of stuff in there to do with, I posted a whole blog fest on Data Protection Day. I think there was about 13 or 14 different blogs from different professionals. So there's lots of stuff already there. And we will be posting the PDF that Scott has mentioned in the attachments on the group. So everything is in the Information Rights Group, so make sure you come and find it. Other than that, I'll stop waffling and let you guys get on with your day. Thanks very much, everyone, for attending, and I shall see you next month. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you all. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.